in present mode. We'll just give it another 30 seconds to a minute before we kick the presentation off.
Okay.
Chat. Okay.
Hey, Joe, can you hear me? Hi, Krishnan, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you doing? Hi, Janani. How are you doing?
Hello.
Right.
I love the beach background.
Oh, yes. I mean, this is something I've been searching for. And during the lockdown, this is very, very soothing. It's something
Hey,
I really... Hey, Manish, how are you doing?
Good, how are you? Looks like
I'm
you're
doing
enjoying
good.
your beach vacation.
It's a virtual beach vacation.
Yeah, that's the new...
Well, it's summer in India. I got to make the most of it.
Oh, yes. But yeah, this lockdown has changed quite a bit. Changed our life.
All right, well, I think we'll kick it off.
Sure.
Thank you everyone for joining us for the second annual Tech Skills Day. Tech Skills Days are about celebrating the power of technology. And we've got an exciting lineup for you today, which I'd really like you to be able to share on your social networks at #TechSkillsDay. Today will take about an hour and I'll be your host for today's session. My name is Jo Lanzaroni. I'm the Marketing Director for Pluralsight in the region, and I support Venki and the India sales team in India. Today we've got an amazing lineup of attendees, and I'd like to introduce Janani Ravi. She's a favourite Pluralsight author, and we have two guests from technology companies, Manish and Krishna from FIS Global and Mindtree. And I'll take you through some unique bios of their background as well too. Firstly, I wanted to share some simple rules about the webinar. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A panel and include your email address so that if we don't get time to get to them, we'll be able to respond to those in the right time. And secondly, we'll be sending you the recordings and the slides that are coming from this presentation. On behalf of Pluralsight, I want to thank you for sharing an hour with us. We understand your time is precious. And for those of you who joined us on the 23rd, I want to apologise for the false start that we had. So today we've got some success and you can see everyone online and ready to share their stories. Today we've got a great interview questions for our tech leaders, and they'll be going first, which is Manish and Krishna. Oops, going forward. And we'll go through some of their tech insights and their background, and they'll share some insights into their business and also their technology backgrounds. And then we'll move to Janani, where we'll go through a similar question around her career and background, and then look to sharing 20 minutes insight into one of her most recent courses around machine learning. So without further ado, I'll kick it off. I'll go through and read both of our esteemed guests their bios, because I won't do it justice trying to remember it. So if you just bear with me while I take everyone through the backgrounds of Manish and Krishnan, and then from there we'll go through the questions. Krishnan's from Mindtree. He leads the learning and development team at Mindtree. It is an IT services company in Bangalore. And he's helped design and implement Mindtree's unique learning platform called the Engineer of Tomorrow. And he's rolled out Mindtree's new age digital platform called Yourbit, which hosts 2,000 plus courses, enabling virtual, social, bite-sized contextual learning across the organization. Krishnan has also had various leadership roles in Mindtree and has also worked for Tata Infotech over the years. Thanks for joining us, Krishnan. And we have Manish from Manish Bijlani from FIS Global. And Manish leads FIS Global solutions-based trainings for technology, product and process training. He caters for all training requirements from third-party clients, captivate business and technology groups spread across India, the Philippines and USA. He leads all the strategic initiatives around skills-based learning, training consultation, client onboarding and RFPs, and he's highly focused around the digitization and creating in-house products and tools that act as learning enablers and drive efficiencies. Previous to FIS Global, Manish has held roles at Vodafone Shared Services, Infosys and Genpact. So thanks for joining us, gentlemen. And if we go to Manish first, can you tell us a little bit about your tech background and how you got into the tech industry?
Thanks, Joe, for the introduction, giving me the opportunity to be part of this webinar and part of the panel. I think the tech journey goes back from the fact that I think it's been about 18 years for me in the field of training with diverse experience. And I think you called out where I started from, from various organizations. I think I joined FIS about 8 years back, and that's where my tech journey started. I joined as a training lead for the BPM COE, but I think with that, FIS being a fintech company organization, are focused around driving various FIS products, banking solutions, which we provide to various banks and financial institutions. I think that's where my journey for, my tech industry was FIS, where it started off with the fact that how do we go about focusing around different technologies, what support can be given. And that's where I picked up, the role of leading the technology training requirements and driving that across for various locations for India, Philippines, and the US.
Great. And then what was one of the key skills that helped you develop your appreciation for the tech industry as a leader, both in CLO and in the tech sort of environment? Was there one particular skill that really enabled you?
I think require any skill, one, there is no age, there's no limitation. I think to pick that up, I think I took this as a challenge coming from a non-technical background. I did pick up this and basis obviously my science background from my college days of little bit programming around C, C++ in those days. I think I had a fair idea and skill around how I can get into this. And I think when we come from a training background, you have a fair understanding of how things work. And in today's time, you will be into a handicap situation in case if you are not aware about how to leverage technology while being in a field of learning and development and driving training initiatives. I think one skill obviously I picked up. Like you mentioned, we picked up about how do we go about FIS being a product company, start contributing rather than just being on the servicing end from a training standpoint. Start focusing on niche products, which can be go-to-market kind of products, is where this journey started off. And I started working in the field of AML and RPA automation is where I started or picked up the skill with my colleagues, and then started working around that to drive and take care of some of the industry problems around banking and see what scope of automation can be applied around that.
Okay, great. And what are the key technologies that are enabling your business today that are different from 2 years ago?
I think, yes, there's been a lot of change. FIS being a product company, majorly our focus is around the technologies used in our products. And over the few years, our requirements from the different line of businesses which we cater today in the technology organization have changed around the new technologies. And the focus obviously has moved around, cloud, DevOps, AI, ML, and that's where our focus has been. We've kind of identified 5 emerging technologies which we want to focus as part of a strategic plan for 2020 and 2021, and then see how we can progress around those and then start being market ready and doing some niche work around that. So I think that's where, the demand has absolutely changed. Our products also today require us to working on legacy products with some newer technologies, and the focus is around seeing that how we can leverage cloud platform, DevOps, and seeing how we can move on from there. So I think that's where our key focus has changed from the business, from the CTOs, from the business leaders, from the clients which we serve today across the globe. We've seen a maximum usage around, so I think I'd like to call this out that, Pluralsight help us to do industry comparison, in terms of where do we stand from a technological learning organization. And we've seen that our maximum usage was around language frameworks and tools. And like I said, focus around Angular, Python, Java, Docker, and .NET. But I think we are in sync with the industry best practices and preferences. As compared to the industries, absolutely, FIs today shows more interest today in security and cloud technologies because we provide banking solutions. We want to be risk-free. That's the main thing. So I think that's where we are, and we continue to leverage platforms like Pluralsight and the others where we partner with to see how we can utilize them in this new situation where work from home is new normal. I think as an organization, we completely believe that it's imperative to, invest and recognize your employees in terms of how you can keep them engaged and keeping them, empowered and able to help them build their skills. I think these platforms absolutely help in taking us to a new journey where we are today.
Your insights into DevOps and cloud and machine learning probably apply to the shifts you're seeing with how your employees are working. Can you share with us any changes that you've made to your employees' learning and how you've innovated with people working from home and being isolated through COVID-19?
Sure. I think that's a good question. And I think out here, obviously with COVID-19 situations, I think one always thought that, trainings could always, complex advanced trainings could always be driven through instructor-led trainings. Obviously, the focus was always there on webinars, VILTs, conducting trainings online using different platforms, I think. So now it's the new real. It's the reality. We have to move on. So I think we've seen great focus in the situation right now where we continue to invest in our people. Very important. And, obviously you save on time today on your transportation, moving from your home to the office. I think utilization all the more gone up for everyone. Working from home is how we look at it. It involves people engaging in different skills and enhancing their own skills depending on the projects they are. So we've run different initiatives within the organization to, one, invest in our people, see how in-house trainings can also be delivered by our evangelists, by our own SMEs within the organization who have these expertise built over the years and are proactive and, quite self-oriented in terms of driving these new technologies. And we've invested in them, not just from initially back in 2019 Q4. We invested heavily into some of them by partnering with some vendor partners from outside to upskill them. And now we're leveraging them. I think we never thought that 2020, we will come across a situation where we will have to get into VILT kind of situation. But I think with the skills and investments being done by us, we look at absolutely leveraging those today. And Pluralsight has been a great partner for us. We did run the Skill IQ Challenge last year as well with FIs in one of our locations,
Right.
and we saw a lot of interest around that. And similarly to that, as we speak right now, for the month of May, we've rolled out a Skill IQ contest to keep people engaged. We saw about 1,800 plus nominations, and out of that, about 735 people have already redeemed this so far. So, which obviously talks about the fact you're not pushing people. People are ready for it. People want to enhance their skills. They want to invest in themselves. So I think it's a great platform which has helped us in terms of pushing our learning in the virtual environment through the online partner. FIs do also invest in platforms like Saba as a learning management system with LinkedIn content. So I think we're parallelly driving everything which makes things happen through the webinars as well, which we're doing with the vendor partners. And today, I think that the amount of licenses which we have help us work around, employees to enhance their skills bases, the standardized content, and the lab environments for few of the courses which are available on Pluralsight. I think that's where we are. I think so far we are on the right trajectory.
Well, that's great to hear that you're actually, yeah. That's great to hear that you're leveraging the circumstances and the skills within your business and nurturing them with Pluralsight. So I appreciate that, and thank you for sharing your story. I'll now move over to Krishnan and go through a similar sort of question scenario. I'll take off the screen because we've got a visual of Krishna here. So Krishna, do you want to share with us how you got into the tech industry and what has been your sort of key background that took you down that path?
So I'm an engineer by profession. So although I came into the people side of things, in the second half of my career, the first half was pretty much, programming. That is what I learned in college. That's what I did, for a living for a very long time. I think I had the good fortune of working on multiple technologies while I was a programmer. Luckily, the IT industry wasn't so developed in those days. So right from mainframe to ERP to, I remember when Java first came out, I remember trying out Java coding for the first time. And then when Microsoft.NET came out, I remember trying, C# coding for the first time. So I pretty much, dabbled in a lot of technologies, during my tech days. I used to work on wireless technologies in an era where wireless technologies weren't around. For example, we did projects for traveling salesmen where, they use their handhelds to do their work, but actually, they used to dock their handhelds in the evening to sync up the data because the wireless networks were not good enough to do that during the day. So I think that was a very exciting journey. That's how I got into technology. But of course, I had larger interest in terms of getting into management and the HR side of things, which is where my career kind of progressed in that direction.
Great. That's good to hear those stories. I can recall some of those downloading sales calls moments. I've been a salesperson myself, so I know what it feels like. What do you think the key skill or key couple of skills helped you in the roles you're in now? What have you learnt that's propelled you? Was it that coding base, or was it is it something else?
I think having that foundation in technology definitely helps. What I've seen is that technology is now becoming part and parcel of everything. So even if you look at learning and development or HR, the way things are done, uses a lot of digital technologies. So I think that background definitely helped. But even when I was a technologist, I used to be interested in many subjects, right? I think sometimes technologists can get a little too hung up about technology. And, their life can begin and end with technology. But I think it's important to, read different kinds of books, watch different kinds of shows, just get your knowledge, up and up. Because you never know. I mean, like in that famous, Steve Jobs video, where he talks about, how he connected, the dots later in his life. I think it's important to, learn and dabble in different things because you never know, when something would be useful. But looking back, I feel that, I always had a curiosity to kind of, learn and dabble in multiple things. And over my career, I've seen that, somewhere or the other, it's useful.
That's really cool. And what do you, as CLO at Mindtree, how do you stay on top of all these new technologies and trends that are happening? So how do you keep that curiosity level and find ways forward that are important for the business and also energize the team?
Yeah, so the world of technology is changing, on a day-to-day basis. But the good thing is that there's a lot of information out there, right? I mean, Pluralsight itself, provides, a lot of good information, not just for a hardcore technologist, but for someone like me now who wants to get a good overview of different areas. But naturally, it's just a Google search away. There are all these courses and conferences and information that is readily available on the internet. But the other thing that I always try and do is reach out. We are a technology company and we have a lot of experts who are out there, working with our customers, really at the cutting edge of things. So what I always like to do is, have no agenda conversations with them. Of course, you need to have, your business conversations. But along with that, sometimes have these no agenda conversations where you're trying to understand, how they view the world, the future of, say, insurance, for example. How is that world really changing? How is technology playing a role in that? And I think, when you have those conversations and you start, piecing all of this together, that also helps you in getting an understanding of, how the business landscape is getting, modified by technology. And I think that knowledge is very useful when you want to go back and, do things within the organization.
I like that term, no agenda conversation. I'm going to steal that one. So another question for you, what technologies have enabled your business in today's world that you wouldn't have thought you would be looking at 2 years ago? So what's changed in that 2 years that's really made a significant impact on your business?
Okay. Well, I think many of the technologies that we really operate in were there 2 years ago too. So I don't think, of course, some of the tools that are used, they might have emerged. But if you look at artificial intelligence or cloud or DevOps or any of these areas that are disrupting the way, work is done, I think they've been around for many years. But of course, they have probably, reached a certain tipping point where now it's really, become mainstream, I would say. I know that there's a lot of hype about AI. I myself did an AI course last year, just trying to, go back to my programming roots and get a grip on, what is this thing that everyone talks about. So I actually did a course just to understand what the whole thing is about. But I still feel, of course, AI is going to disrupt, certain industries and certain kinds of things in a big way. But I also feel that sometimes it's a little overhyped. And if I look at my company, I would say that big data, data analytics, data visualization, cloud technologies, DevOps, the way, client side, programming is done. Some of the more fundamental things, these are the ones that are really, making an impact to us and our customers at this point in time.
That's great. And just finally, as I asked Manish, is there any significant changes your business has made, having had to go to employees working remotely? Is there anything that you've initiated that's different from a tech skills perspective that would be interesting for the audience?
So
Sure.
we've always, oh, sorry, is that for Manish?
It's for you, Krishnan. Yeah, the same question I asked Manish, but it's for you as well too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, we always had a culture of remote working, and almost all our processes, including learning and development, happen in a very, very virtual way. And so that was, I think, a good investment that we had made, historically, in terms of, just being ahead of the curve. So in fact, we've actually doubled our learning in April on a month-on-month basis. as compared to, our average for last year on a monthly basis. So in many ways, I think the transition has been very seamless for us. I think, people have also embraced the new normal. As I said, the learning and development that each one is doing has actually gone up, but not at the cost of work. On the customer side, of course, we are seeing a lot of disruptions as well. And, in any kind of scenario, there are always opportunities also that open up. Cloud, for example, is, one area where we really feel things, will pick up because of COVID. And, internally also from a learning and development standpoint, we are focusing on cloud and ensuring that, almost everyone in the organization, understands cloud very well. So there are these kind of changes. Of course, it's a crisis that the world is going through, but every cloud has a silver lining, and I'm sure, there will be opportunities for those who are ready.
Right. Oh, well, thank you for sharing your story, Krishnan. I really appreciate that. And thank you for giving us an insight into Mindtree as well too. So Venki, you popped up. Would you like to say some words as well too before we hand over to Janani?
Sure. I've engaged with both of these organizations for quite some time, me and my team. One thing that I've always seen is the kind of an interest in wanting to offer services to developers in the most easiest manner, and which is what I've always seen with all of these organizations is more employee centric, more developer centric, more technology centric, and try to make the ecosystem most amenable to these folks, and have been progressive and leaders. And thank you, Krishnan and Manish, for helping us with this tech skill. And always a pleasure working with both of your organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Venki. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Venki. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. So over to Janani. Thanks again for attending the presentation and our Tech Skills Day celebration. I want to share everyone your bio as well too, because it's quite prestigious. Janani's got a master's degree from Stanford, no more prestigious than that, and has worked for 7 years plus at Google. She was one of the original engineers on Google Docs and holds 4 patents for its real-time collaborative editing framework. After spending years in the Bay Area, Singapore and New York at such companies as Microsoft, Google and Flipkart, Janani has decided to set up her own business, and it's combining her passion of technology and teaching, and she's the co-founder of Lunicorn, a content studio focused on providing high quality content for technical skill development. And one of the biggest statistics I love to share is she's probably the most prolific author at Pluralsight, having over 120 courses on our platform. So welcome, Janani, and thanks for being on today's webinar. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
Great.
Hi, everyone.
We're going to do a similar little question and answer session, and then let you roll into your machine learning oversight for us as well too. So just to start off things the same as the other questions for the other gentlemen, tell us about your tech background and how you got into technology.
Maybe I'll give you a 30-second life story first. I got my bachelor's in computer engineering from Mumbai University back in 2001. I went off to the US for grad school. I finished my master's in electrical engineering from Stanford. 2003, joined Microsoft in Redmond right after that, switched to Google in New York, and then started bouncing around different countries and cities with Google, till finally my husband and I both ended up in Singapore. And in 2014, we really wanted to come back home to India. We said, no, the time is right. We were in Hyderabad for a little bit, but we said, this time, let's come back for real. And we moved back to Bangalore, and both of us joined Flipkart. We only lasted about a year, and by 2015, we wanted to start something for ourselves. So we quit to start Lunicorn, which is where we still work. So it's been almost 5 years now. So that's the 30-second life story. But how did I get into tech? Now, if you knew my parents and you knew my background, really, it's if I did anything other than tech, that would be surprising. So it's kind of by default. So where I come from, if you got the grades, you took up computer engineering. Like no one allowed you to go anywhere else. You were just like steered directly towards the nearest engineering college your parents could find. And that's exactly what happened to me. The more interesting thing is why I remained in tech, because that decision was much more deliberate. Because once you graduate, there are a bunch of things you can do. I could have done my MBA, or I could have done chosen to go into journalism if I so wish, because once you're done with engineering, your parents kind of let you go. But I chose to remain in tech, and that was a much more conscious decision, is because I feel technology and like programming is very, very meritocratic, right? Your code doesn't lie. And especially when new technologies come along, everyone is at the same starting point. So then once you dive in, and then it's your native abilities, and you can take it, it's up to you to see whether you can take it further than others can. So how productive you are depends on how much effort you put in to master those technologies. And that's why I think I stayed in tech, because of how interesting and meritocratic it is. Sorry, I can't hear you, Joe.
No, I unmuted myself. Apologies. I was listening avidly to your story, and as a parent, I'll take that on board, and steering my kids down to tech as well too. What's the one skill that really propelled your career?
So I should say though that before Lunicorn, my corporate career was, I would say, so-so. Like, I've had good jobs. I've been happy in those jobs. I've worked with some really good people, but as far as careers go, it was nothing great, right? I was earning pretty well, but I don't think I was particularly successful while I worked at other people's companies. I didn't really learn how to climb in big organizations. I don't know. I don't think I learned how to manage upwards. And I feel like maybe it cost me in, as far as jobs go, but it really helped me once I got out on my own. So I think the most important thing all through has been that I've been very technical, no matter what the technology, and I haven't been afraid to start from scratch. Like, you do one thing and then something changes, and then it's a completely new experience once again, and you start off at zero. That's the good thing and the bad thing about technology, I guess. So, but my willingness to start from scratch, it hurts you more than helps you in jobs, right? Like, in a big enterprise, you need to build up your turf, and then you kind of need to grow in that role. And then if you're an experienced engineer, you're worried about new technologies, because, then you're back at the same level as someone fresh out of school. But because I wasn't worried about that, I think that helped me in recent years, right? Once I got out on my own, it didn't really help me much while I was in a job. So I think that's the skill, not being scared of new technology.
Okay, that's great. So given that you're one of our most prolific authors, what do you like about creating content and sharing knowledge?
So I like that the content is technical, because I get to do all new stuff. It's right. It's not that I have to know everything about a technology before I start, right? I usually know something adjacent to that technology, or I've done something similar before, and I see how this fits in. So that's kind of, I think that's what drives me. It's kind of self-expression. Making content is self-expression. Someone likes to write a book. Like, I couldn't write a book to save my life, but I like making technical content. There's also a proximate cause. I do all of the courses I make, I don't make them. It's not that I'm sitting alone and making them. I work with the team, and all of us learn those technologies together. We're helping each other. So we're kind of working together, which is what allows us to be efficient and prolific. So, okay. And another thing is, we like running towards new technologies.
Well, that was linked to my next question. How do you stay ahead? So if you're running towards them, how do you find them?
So I think just seeking them out helps, and then diving in. Then once you start working on something, it leads to something else. I guess that's the main thing. Like, if you're constantly doing something, you're constantly coding in some technology, it'll lead you to the next. And I think it helps to not be narrow-minded about what technologies you like. Like, I see a lot of people saying, oh, I'm a Java backend developer, or I'm a data scientist, or I am a machine learning engineer, or I am a front-end developer. But really, technology is all the same. Like, I've done front-end development, I've done Java development, I've done C# development, I've done a little bit of C++, but it doesn't matter. They're all the same if you kind of figure out what's common amongst them. Another thing about being a good technologist, I think Krishnan mentioned that as well, is being a generalist. Like, I read a lot of non-technology books. I consume a lot of non-technical content. And on my reading list, there is this book, which I haven't read yet, called Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. But it seems to make the point that we need intellectual breadth and intellectual curiosity. Otherwise, we'll fall behind. Doesn't matter whether you're technically very good or very sharp in whatever your domain of expertise is. So,
great, awesome. So then, getting into your field of expertise, how did you get into machine learning?
So I think machine learning in its primitive form. So my husband is also technical, and we work on many projects together, especially now, over the last 5 years. And he was in pre-crisis Wall Street and quantitative finance, and he was into building a lot of models, like trying to, model how the financial markets work. We've been a couple a really long time, like 20 years or so. And so he has been working on this kind of modeling since 2003 and 2004. And we are both interested in the financial markets. I mean, it was his profession. My profession was primarily engineering, but the financial markets interest both of us. So we were into ML early, but by about 2015 or 2016, it was really obvious that this time around, there was something different around the hype in ML. Technology had caught up, computing had caught up, the availability of cloud platforms made it possible for someone sitting somewhere to actually harness the power of these models. So that's how we kind of started experimenting with these. And, machine learning had progressed such that, it could make sense of situations that only maybe the most experienced traders could. So that has kind of been the impetus for us to stay current with the latest in ML, because we can apply it to the financial markets and see what comes of it. So.
Okay, so you've got all the secret tricks of how to make lots of money then, have you?
I have no idea. I'm mostly can go both ways.
Yeah, exactly. So then if someone's with no experience wants to get into AI or machine learning and they're interested in taking that first step, what skills would they start with?
So I feel people get into data science and AI and machine learning, maybe kind of from primarily two backgrounds. Obviously, I'm not ruling out the rest. I mean, the people can come into it from any background. Tends to be either programming, software engineers, or mathematicians. And I feel mathematicians maybe are not as interested, or maybe their programming foundations aren't very strong. And the software engineers are not up to speed on their math. And I feel that there are three components to someone like being a good machine learning engineer. The first is the programming, the second is the quantitative intuition, and finally there is the big picture psychological bits. So get the first two right, because they lay your foundation, because at least you'll be able to do stuff to figure out, and then you can figure out what it means. But if you're unable to do anything, you have nothing to work from, right? So programming and quantitative intuition, don't poo-poo at any of these, do both. And a great resource for this is Pluralsight. Pluralsight, and I'm not just saying that because it's a Pluralsight webinar. I mean, it has amazing courses, right? And I watch Pluralsight sometimes when I feel I want to learn something, and I'll find a course which has been well rated, an author who I know teaches well, and I'll seek those courses out and learn myself. And I have engineers on my team learning from Pluralsight. My son learns from Pluralsight, right? He's learning. He needs to learn to program, so put him on Pluralsight, find a basic course for him to do. So, and he's just 8, so he's able to pick up. And there are resources for all ages and all backgrounds. So that's for the programming and the quantitative intuition. The psychology, that's odd sounding, but you need to know yourself when you're working with models, because it's very tempting to believe that the model actually says something that you want it to, right? You'll start believing that the model is going to change the world or make a ton of money, but you should be willing to kind of look at the model for what it is and not what you've put into it, and make your decisions rationally.
Okay, great insight. Well, that's a nice segue into your presentation, which you're going to share with the team, a high-level overview of your most recent machine learning session you did for us in March. So I'll hand over if you share the screen, you can pull your slides up, and we can go through your presentation. And again, as I mentioned before, we'll take questions at the end, and if we've got time to answer a few online, and then we'll get back to you if we haven't answered them post the event. Thanks, Janani.
Sounds good. I'll stop my video, and I guess you'll give me the...
So you just press share your screen.
I don't see that. Sorry. I don't know where to look for it.
I've stopped sharing. Now you can take it.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Now, I don't see a share screen link. I'm not sure where to look for it. Mute my audio, all the renames. Do you need to pass on like a host token to me?
There we go.
Oh, I'm the co-host now. Okay. That's exciting, but now what do I do?
You should have a share your screen button down below to share your PowerPoint.
I actually don't see any button. I'm sorry. I don't think I'm being
green button
here.
The green button in the middle, share screen.
So I'm on some funny view where I can only see the participants and myself, and I can't see any green button.
All right. Try tabbing out to another Zoom window.
Zoom.
Tab.
Oh yeah, I found it.
Thanks. Thanks,
It had
Shahid.
disappeared.
Apologies to everyone. This is live, so we're operating in the moment. Thanks, Janani.
All
right.
Thank
you.
Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, and I'll take my video off, and you can.
Sounds good. All right. I'm going to dive right in. And by diving right in, I'm going to take you back some time ago, not very long back, only about a year or so ago. And back in March 2019, here is what the SoftBank CEO, Masayoshi Son, had to say. AI will completely change the world humans live within 30 years. Here is another quote from the same article, deep inside the article. The diseases that we could not solve in the past will be cured. Pretty ironic considering all that's happening in the world today. Well, what can I say? Reality bites. Now, here is another headline from the Wall Street Journal about 6 months after the headline that we just looked at. AI startup boom raises questions of exaggerated tech savvy. Now, the article talks about the general phenomenon of artificial intelligence and machine learning not really living up to the hype generated. And this is something Krishnan mentioned as well. Now, to cite a specific example, journalists dug into this particular company which claimed to have built a software and an artificial intelligence system that democratizes the process of mobile application development. The claim was that mobile application development involves reusing code components. So this company claimed to have 500 to 1,000 pieces of reusable components, which based on user requirements could be put together using their artificial intelligence system to automate the process of mobile application development. Up to 80% of the tasks involved in mobile app development could be automated. This was their claim. What was the reality? Documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal suggest Engineer.ai doesn't use AI to assemble code for apps as it claims. So what did they do instead? Well, Wall Street Journal indicated that the company relies on human engineers in India and elsewhere to do most of the work. Now, unfortunately, there is anecdotal evidence to prove that this is not entirely isolated. Why does this happen? Why do these exaggerations exist? This is because startups can raise huge amounts of money in the hundreds of millions of dollars based on prototypes, ideas, or even just the founders' personalities. But established companies that have had their IPO, they're held to a much higher bar. They've got to develop the software has to be accepted by their clients, people have to be willing to pay money to buy what they've developed. Private investors, they love funding moonshots, whereas public investors, they're much more hard-nosed. Public markets look for real money coming in. And this is why these exaggerated claims exist. But the events in the past year or so seem to indicate that the pendulum has swung back in the other direction. Established companies that have been developing software for years have found their moment in the sun once again. Here is another headline from the Wall Street Journal. Our IT is so good, let's sell it, firms say. So established companies who have been developing software for years have found new ways to monetize their products. They've found that there is actually a demand for the products and services that they have. After all, this is how Amazon Web Services was born. Amazon is an online e-commerce retailer. They had all of this extra infrastructure, technical infrastructure they had built up in order to support spike sales. Days where they needed all this extra capacity because of all the customers logging on. They started monetizing this excess capacity, and that's how AWS became this cash gushing machine. So there is reason to believe that old school software development is back in vogue. The question we now need to ask ourselves is, So was this artificial intelligence and machine learning all just hype? Well, the jury is still out on that. We have no real answer yet. In my opinion, though, AI and ML can be game changing for any organization so long as we as engineers know how to deal with the realities of deployed models. We need to understand how deployed models work and how software development is different from model development. And we worked with software for decades, but machine learning models are not really software. There's a fundamental difference. Software ages like wine, while machine learning models age like milk. In other words, software, when deployed to production, improves over time. Bugs are found, fixes are made. Machine learning models start degrading in quality as soon as they are deployed. And once we understand this fundamental difference between software and machine learning models, we'll be able to take the right steps to improve our models so they're actually useful in the real world. So let's talk about the life cycle of software. This is something you're intimately familiar with. You know that software that has been around for a while is very robust. More bug fixes have been applied, code paths have been tested, usability fixes have been applied. Even if there are external changes, they rarely affect regular software. And in fact, you can have a periodic release cycle to add in new features as you want to. In the case of a machine learning model, though, you'll find that a model is often at its best just before being deployed to production. It's a rookie assumption to think that deployed models work as well as they did in testing. This is because machine learning models, once deployed, need to be updated constantly. Static machine learning models become less useful over time. Model development is not the same as software development. This is because machine learning models need a constant stream of new data to keep them working well so that models can adjust to the shifting realities that exist in the real world. Deploying models is just the beginning. It's like giving birth to a child. No one will say that your work is done. You still have to nurture the child, bring him or her up, deal with the teenage years. So here is where we are at today. Models do well in the lab, but not on the production line. Now, before you completely dismiss ML and AI as hype, here are 3 simple steps that you can take to make sure that your models work well in production. Now, these are simple solutions to complex problems. The solutions are simple as in they're easy to understand, but actually implementing them is quite difficult because it requires a fundamental change in mindset. The first solution has to do with how you train your models. Avoid overfitting. Make sure that the model that you've chosen is not too complex for the data that you have. There are plenty of techniques available, and we'll talk about a few of these in just a bit. Secondly, make sure that you're handling real-time data correctly. Make sure that if you're working with batch data and streaming data, both kinds of data are processed using the same code path. And finally, babysit your model after deployment. Don't just move on to the next cool problem. There's plenty of work still left for your model. So let's talk about problems afflicting AI-based solutions. We have overfitting, training serving, skew, concept, drift, and concerted adversaries. We'll start off by discussing what it means to have an overfitted model. And it's best to visualize this using a very simple example. Imagine that these orange data points that you see is your training data, and they are projected along this X and Y axis. And your objective is to find the best curve through these points. And that curve represents your machine learning model, and we'll use that curve for prediction. Now, we say that a curve has a good fit if the distances of the points from the curve are small. That is, your curve follows your points very closely. But taken to an extreme, you could have a curve which looks like this. Would you call this a good machine learning model? Well, a good machine learning model knows how to perform well on test data, that is data it hasn't seen before. But the model that we have here simply has memorized the training data. It hasn't really found any general patterns in the training data. So once you're working with test data, you'll find that this model doesn't perform well. And this model is an overfitted model. An overfitted model is one that has great performance in training, but poor performance in real usage. In fact, if you'd gone with a simpler model, such as a simple straight line through your original training data points, you might find that it performs worse in training, but it works better with test data. So overfitting is when your model has low training error. A model does very well on training data, but has a high test error. It works poorly with real data. And the reason that your model has overfit on the data is that it's probably too complex for the data that you've used to train your model. Maybe your data isn't diverse enough. The model has not managed to extract general patterns that exist in the data, and your model's ability to adapt to new unseen data is poor. That's a hallmark of an overfitted model. How do you prevent overfitting? If you're using a traditional machine learning model, such as linear or logistic regression or decision trees or support vector machines, you can use a technique called regularization, which adds a penalty term to penalize complex models. You can use cross-validation to train your model, where you have distinct training and validation phases. If you're building models using neural networks, you can use dropout. This is where you intentionally turn off certain neurons during training, forcing other neurons in that layer to learn more from your data. And whether you're using traditional ML models or deep learning, you can always use ensemble learning. This is where you don't work with just one machine learning model. You have different models with different characteristics, and your final prediction is an aggregate of the predictions from the individual learners. Let's move on to training serving skew. If you find that your models perform well in backtest but poorly in production, it's quite possible that training serving skew is what's causing this. It's a big but neglected cause of poorly performing ML models. What does that mean? Training data is often sourced from batched pipelines. You typically train your model on historical data, and that's lying around in a database or a file system somewhere in your organization. And this training data tends to be processed meticulously well. You've spent a lot of time really massaging the data so your model is trained well and seems to do well while you're in the pre-deployment phase. But if you think about prediction data, the data on which your model has to finally work, that's typically sourced real time from streaming pipelines, and it may be processed in an ad hoc manner with many shortcuts. And this is what leads to training serving skew. You need to ensure that batch and streaming data is processed using in the same manner, and in fact, preferably using the same pipeline. Now, there are many software architectures in the real world that allow you to combine batch and streaming data. Two most popular architectures, or ones which are well known, are Lambda and Kappa architectures. Both serve to combine batch and streaming data. They just combine this data in slightly different ways. The Lambda architecture uses the batch data as the source of truth and couples them less tightly. The Lambda architecture tends to be more robust. Kappa architectures today are, however, more popular. They're getting to be more popular. This uses the stream as the source of truth. So you use some kind of technology which retains a log of all of the data seen, and you always process from the stream using a single processing framework. So here is an example of a simple Kappa architecture using technologies from the Google Cloud Platform. All cloud platforms have equivalents for each of these components. So you have batch and streaming data, and you process this data using the same code. You maintain one code base for simplicity and robustness. Moving on, let's talk about concept drift and concerted adversaries. When you're building a machine learning model, what you're trying to figure out is what is the relationship that exists between your features, which form the X variables, and your target, your labels, which form the Y variables. Now, this relationship is what you're trying to model, and this relationship is dynamic. It changes over time. Machine learning models which fail to keep up will find that their performance suffers. So concept drift happens because the world around you has changed, relationships are dynamic and not static, and your machine learning model has not kept up with these changing relationships. Let's look at a visualization of how concept drift might occur in the world. Let's say you're trying to classify reviews, find the sentiment of reviews. You want to classify them as positive or negative. You have number of words in a review on the y-axis and the time when the review was posted on the x-axis. Now, you might use some kind of decision boundary in order to classify positive and negative reviews. And this is the decision boundary that you found based on the training and test data that was available at the time you deployed your model. This was the data available to you. But as your model is used for prediction, new data points come in. And it's quite possible that your model gets it wrong for many of these data points. You need to actually go in and correctly classify these data points and use this new data to retrain your model so that your decision boundary is updated to reflect the new realities. Once you know that your decision boundary has changed, your model needs to be updated on the new data. This is how you mitigate concept drift, by constantly monitoring and retraining your deployed models. And finally, let's talk of concerted adversaries. Now, the most common AI use cases are fraud detection, fake news detection, quantitative trading, or any other use case. No matter what situation you use machine learning, for whatever your situation where you're building your machine learning model, you have concerted adversaries which try to confuse and mislead your models. These are the hackers of your machine learning models. How do you mitigate this? How do you protect yourself against this? Well, human minders for machine learning models are getting to be more important. When you know your model has got it wrong, often organizations have human minders who go back and learn from cases where the model's predictions were wrong. And they actually correctly classify these instances. And these correctly classified instances are fed back to retrain the machine learning model. So we are kind of back to the future, from machine learning back to manual learning. So thwarting concerted adversaries requires continuous manual learning to complement machine learning. So to quickly summarize, before you dismiss AI and ML as hype, here are 3 simple solutions that you can try and solve your complex problems. Avoid overfitting, handle real-time data correctly, make sure you process batch and streaming data using the same code base to avoid training, serving, skew, and avoid concept drift and mitigate against concerted adversaries by babysitting your model after deployment. And that's it. This is the last slide for the day.
Great,
so
thank you.
if you're interested in courses on Pluralsight which cover these topics, here are some courses on screen for you.
So we do have a couple of questions. Janani, have you got a couple of minutes to answer those if we go a touch over?
Sure.
Do you want to put your video on too so we can see you there?
I'm trying to figure that out. Yeah.
And do you want to stop sharing and then we'll just have
Got it.
So one quick question that's come up is, what's the difference between traditional machine learning models and deep learning models based on neural networks? And what would a newcomer do to, what would a newcomer to this field focus on?
Traditional machine learning models tend to have a standard algorithm that they use in order to learn from data. For example, decision trees are an example of a traditional machine learning model, which uses a tree-like algorithmic structure in order to learn more from the data. We know that logistic regression tries to fit an S-curve on your data. So there is a standard algorithm which it uses to extract characteristics. With deep learning and neural networks, you have no idea what the algorithm is. You have these learning units, you put them together, you wire them up, and they learn from your data. What they learn from your data might surprise even you. So there is nothing like what's going to come out. Now, for someone who's a newcomer to this field, if they go directly to learn, they go directly to work with neural networks, I think it tends to be a little hard to wrap your head around what exactly is going on. If you want to take baby steps in the world of ML, I would say start with traditional models, simple regression, support vector machines, decision trees, k-means clustering, explore the scikit-learn library. But deep learning is where you're probably going to get the most bang for the buck. And once you know how to build and use models, you'll find that using a deep learning model is no different from using traditional ML models. So definitely I would encourage newcomers to start working with neural networks. It isn't that hard once you've realized that there is no algorithm that you can understand. So a newcomer should focus on deep learning. There's no difference when it comes to using the 2 kinds of models.
Okay, and there's another question here as well too. from Mohit. I really want to learn AI ML. I'm primarily a .NET developer, now seeking my profile for AI and ML. I need a roadmap for learning. I watched many tutorials, but those are only introductory. These tutorials are only about definitions. I want some industry requirement kind of tutorial path. Can you give me any insights?
My suggestion would be so I feel Pluralsight is a great resource here. And once again, not just plugging it, because I know that I've used courses on Pluralsight to learn myself, and they have very well-defined paths for, you don't know many of the deep learning frameworks and machine learning frameworks use Python. So you might want to move from .NET over to Python just because you have access to these libraries as you're learning as a student of machine learning. And once you become, once you're at an intermediate level, then you can go with the language of your choice and work with that. But if you just want a lot of material, it's better that you program in Python. And if you're a .NET developer, learning Python is extremely simple. Python, if you're programmed in any other language, Python will seem like a piece of cake. This is how C++ programmers felt when Java came along, right? That's how you'll feel when you see Python. So I think it's worth investing time and effort in learning Python and then working through the machine learning literacy, feature engineering, and other parts on Pluralsight. So they have a bunch of courses which go from simple basic courses for those who haven't done any ML before to quite complex intuition, including demos. So all of them have hands-on, maybe I just speak for myself and the courses that I have watched, but I have never done a course on Pluralsight without having plenty of demos. Like 70-80% of the course will be demos. Now, will these demos help you work with an organization with that kind of data? They'll give you the right principles and the concepts, right? But the data that you actually have within an org will be very different from the data that you encounter when you're working with data sets. But if you understood the principles, you should be able to apply this within an organization as well. But make sure you study those well and you're actually coding and not just watching the courses.
Okay, cool. And that links into our last question that we could probably take today, which is how important is coding in data science, and is familiarity with cloud computing a must for developing models?
So I would say coding is an absolute requirement, because it's not just enough to have the intuition. You won't be able to put it into practice if you can't code for yourself, right? And for me, coding is necessary for everything. And coding is a means of self-expression, and it's a means of achieving independence, right? It's self-expression because you can build something that you want to, and it's independence because if you can't code, you have to be beholden to someone else to implement your ideas. Now, if that person is great, then you're not adding value. And if that person isn't very good, then your ideas might fail because of that person's incompetence. So really, just learn to code yourself. Now, as far as cloud computing goes, and it's actually the presence of these cloud platforms which allow anyone sitting at home to just build very complex models tackling hard problems, because I wouldn't be able to start getting all of my data center set up, installing everything. If I had to do everything myself, it would take forever. But thanks to the cloud platforms, you can really leverage the resources they have to offer. And machine learning is at a point today where all of the components are almost like plug and play. You need to have some intuition about how you put them together, and cloud platforms can really help you, squeeze insights out of your models.
Great. Thanks, Janani. That's an amazing insight into machine learning and how to start off from different coding backgrounds to get into machine learning and AI. So really wanted to say thank you for your time today and sharing your career insights. It's been pretty amazing. And I know you've downplayed your expertise, but to go to Stanford and work for all those amazing IT companies and then to be sharing it as a Pluralsight author is an honor for us. So we really appreciate the information and the context you've shared with us today. And I know Venki would like to thank you as well too. So I'll hand it over to Venki.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jahid, and thanks everyone. And thanks especially to Janani. I was there, part of your March offering as well. And for being a total zero on AIML, I could relate to something from
I'm glad
what that you had given. Very wonderful. And thank you for just being part of this event. Obviously, the intent and purpose of this is more so to encourage people to learn on new technologies, and your way of simplifying on these technologies is something I have found myself personally very connected with, and I'm sure technologists will also see and very much appreciate the time spent with us. And obviously looking forward to a lot more of these sessions coming forward, coming through the year, Janani.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Great. So a message to everyone, stay safe and enjoy your Indian summer, and look forward to more commentary from our authors and from Pluralsight over the next few months as well too. So thank you for your time again. We know it's important. Your time is precious, and we really value your time spending it with Pluralsight. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.